From what I understand, there's about to be a whirlwind that comes through, so enjoy it. So Father Andrew's talk is going to be on how the body was wrapped in the Shroud of Turin. Father Andrew Dalton is a professor of theology at the Pontifical Athenaeum Regina Apostolorum. Father Andrew Dalton, a Catholic priest, a shroud scholar, bridges scientific discovery and theological insights. He holds a postgraduate certificate in shroud studies from the International Center of Shroud Studies in Turin and teaches at the Pontifical Athenaeum Regina Apostolorum in Rome. A global speaker on the Shroud of Turin, he has lectured across Asia and serves on the board of Athenia, promoting shroud research. He is an author and a world-renowned speaker. Let's welcome Father Andrew Dalton.
Well, I'm excited to be here with you and to talk on this particular topic, which I've never done in this setting. I did prepare a paper last summer at the Society of Biblical Literature in Amsterdam. I spoke and gave a title. The title was also about how the body was wrapped. There I was talking to Bible scholars, and they didn't know much about the shroud. And so what I've sometimes found is in the world of the shroud, not nearly as much attention is given to kind of the exegetical inside baseball that Bible scholars like to talk about. So hopefully we can bridge the gap here. I'm so curious to see. I know it holds up to snuff amongst the John scholars. I'm not so sure my theory will be as unscathed amongst the shroud experts. So I want to actually kind of move quickly through some of the material so I can get some feedback and hopefully critique, and I can perfect and learn from some of you. So when I spoke in Amsterdam, the title was Reasons to Believe, Johannine Exegesis, and the Turin Shroud. So you can see in that subtitle kind of the blend of Bible and science. And already in this picture, you see a little hint at where I'm going as far as the proposal of how the linen cloths might have wrapped the body. More on that in a moment. Let's begin with the biblical data. And here I am going to read the text to point out especially 5 exegetical points that I think we need to hold together as we read. Okay, so here's what I want to be. I want to be a Bible detective for a second. I'm going to gather up clues. This is the methodology. To be fancy about it, we call this abductive reasoning. It's just what Sherlock Holmes does when he gets to the crime scene. He goes and gathers up clues, right? There's a clue, there's another, and what we try to do from there is infer the best explanation. Given the data, what's the narrative? What's the story we tell ourselves? What do we imagine about how the body lay in the tomb? It's not an easy question, I'll tell you that. And already there's plenty of debate on this point. In fact, after 15 years of shroud study, I think this is the singular most difficult question to understand, how the body is in relation to the cloths. And so let's gather up clues, shall we, together. We're starting in John chapter 20, verse 1. I'll just read. Now on the first day of the week, of course Sunday, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early while it was still dark and saw the stone had been taken away from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They've taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they've laid him." So Peter went out with the other disciple, and they were going toward the tomb. Both of them were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. And stooping to look in, he saw the linen cloths lying. Here's my first pause. Just if you highlight the Greek here, you'll notice that it says blepe, he saw, the linen cloths, ta othonia, it's a plural, saw the linen cloths, and then we get a participle, we get a modifier, kemena, and that means lying. You've noticed I crossed out the word there in English, because although it appears in many translations of ours, there is no corresponding Greek word for the word there. That is merely assumed and added in by the translators. Okay, so this is the first mention of the linen cloths in verse 5. We're going to have two more mentions of this word. Stooping, he saw the Othonia, he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came following him and went into the tomb. He saw the linen cloths lying. Again, same point. He saw ta Othonia, again it's the plural, and kemana means lying. Notice that same attribution, the same modifier is going to appear twice. This, I think, is significant. Verse 7, and the face cloth. That's a kind of free-flowing translation. The word is to sudarion in Greek. It's a loan word from Latin. The sudor means sweat. Sweat cloth is quite literally what a sudarium is in Latin. When it comes into Greek as a loan word, it's more generic, and so you'll get translations like face cloth, handkerchief, napkin, all valid translations. Here in the ESV, they opted for face cloth, and you know why they went with that? Well, it's the phrase that comes just after, because we're told that it had been on Jesus' head. Okay, head cloth, face cloth, you get the idea. And he's... what do we know about this face cloth? Well, it's not lying. This is the negation, and that same word, now it's singular, kemenon. It's not lying, same participle we saw before, with the linen cloths, but folded up in a place by itself. There you have the Greek. Verse 8, then the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went in. He saw and believed. Eden kai epistusesin. For as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to their homes. I'll point out that the word as yet is udepe, udepo, and this can be, what I'm going to argue for, is what's called an inceptive udepo. Inceptive means something is beginning, like an inception. What's beginning? First steps towards belief as they see. Let's keep reading the passage and I'll bring out the questions. I want to have this familiar on because we're going to discourse about it in a moment. Notice how this passage doesn't end in verse 10, although many of us cut it off also for convenience and also in our liturgy. But it began with Mary. It begins with Mary. I'll highlight here that I'm going to end this talk with Michaela, who will dance. She's a classically trained ballerina, and I hope that we can segue from a very heady discourse into something more contemplative. And if ever there was a subject that's worthy of it, I feel I do an injustice to throw so much Greek and grammar at you guys. But I want to do that. When you're in a garden, sometimes you need to get dirty, hands in the weeds, and then you can sit down and contemplate what's beautiful. But first things first. Let's keep digging. Verse 11. Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she stooped to look in the tomb. See that same verb of stooping and looking? We're going to get that in Luke's gospel too. What did she see when she stooped? Well, two angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had lain, one at the head and one at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I don't know where they have laid him." Having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she didn't know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you've laid him. I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brothers and say to them, I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and that he had said these things to her. There's so many beautiful aspects of this to unpack. Let's see if I can do justice to at least some of them. But I want to stay focused on the central question, and it's the hard one. What did he see so that he believed? I've often said that the gospel writer does not say, despite what they saw, they believed anyway, but rather in light of what he saw. They saw and believed. You know, there's a scene in Indiana Jones that I always remember. It's the one of the Lost Ark. Do you know when he has to cross this abyss and he can't see any bridge across? So until he takes out some rice and throws it, and he's, aha, there was a bridge all along. It was just, soaked in shadow, and he hadn't seen it. But what he does before he throws the rice is close his eyes and leaps out into the darkness, utterly blind. A lot of people use this language to speak of faith. I think it's completely inappropriate. It's the exact opposite of what we find in the gospel. He saw and believed. Remember what Jesus said, believe me, or believe because of the works that I do. Jesus was happy to provide reasons to believe. Do you know what the principal sign? He said he'd give this evil generation that demands one, but won't get one. The sign of Jonah. As he was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a fish, so too the Son of Man, 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Jesus gives signs. Jesus gives reasons to believe. And here, upon the first notion, the first indication, gesturing at all in the direction towards belief in the resurrection, and it's tied to sight, not blindness. I think I might have lost my microphone. I'll try to project. All right, so what did he see? What did the biblical exegetes have to say about this question? I've enumerated the 4 most typical answers that you'll find. What did he see so that he believed? Well, he saw an empty tomb. So say Ritterbos and Whitaker. No, it's not that exactly. It's more specific. It's the body's absence. See? Carlton gets more specific. Or maybe it's that they saw the linen cloths and the face cloth. Okay. Or is it some combination of the above? Says Beasley Murray. This is what, if you go to the biblical scholars, they're going to tell you is the answer to the tough question. What did they see? They saw an empty tomb. They saw that the body wasn't there. They saw the linen cloths and the face cloth, or some combination. My thesis is distinct. It's more specific.
Can I adjust your microphone if you want?
Please.
Yeah, it's on
Upside down. That's my bad.
That's good. Put it right here. And then we'll get rid of this.
Okay. Thanks for professional help. All right. So here's my thesis, and I think it's pretty. I think it's rather unspectacular in a way, and yet I think it needs to be said. It's the condition of the empty tomb, and I'm going to unpack what that condition is. John's data is compatible with data from the Turin Shroud. The Bible and science are harmonizable. That's what I'm trying to argue. Again, this is for a scholarly setting, right? This is this academic track. I'm often in a pastoral setting myself. I'm a priest. I'm also often preaching at a pulpit. But I also know what it means to speak amongst modernists and secular scientists. And so we need to bring our A game when it comes to making academic arguments. And this is what I'm trying to do here. Okay, so rather attainable results, I hope. Notice when I say the condition of the empty tomb, I'm hinting at the very affirmation of what the Catechism of the Catholic Church has to say in this essential number. Can I just read from Luke's Gospel? Why do you seek the living among the dead, says the angel. Jesus isn't here, right? He has risen. End quote. The first element we encounter in the framework of the Easter events is the empty tomb. In itself, it is not a direct proof of resurrection. The absence of Christ's body from the tomb could be explained otherwise. I think that's a very honest answer. Nonetheless, the empty tomb was still an essential sign. It was necessary, even if not sufficient, right? It's an essential sign for all. Its discovery by the disciples was the, first step. The first step towards recognizing the very fact of the resurrection. This was the case first with the holy women, then with Peter, the disciple whom Jesus loved, affirmed that when he entered the empty tomb and discovered the linen cloths lying, and I crossed out the word there. He saw and believed. Here's the killer phrase. This suggests, what suggests? He saw and believed on the tail, on the heels of seeing the linen cloths. This suggests that he realized from the empty tomb's condition that the absence of Jesus' body could not have been of human doing. It's not a resuscitation of a corpse. Somebody didn't give CPR to somebody. That's not that we had some medical attention given to some guy. No, it's not that Jesus had simply returned to earthly life, as had been the case with the Lazarus. Lazarus was indeed resuscitated, but not gloriously risen. Isn't that an essential difference? The poor guy had to die twice, right? Lazarus died only and to rise back into a mortal state. Eventually, he'd go the way we all go, into the grave. Martha would say, I know he'll rise on the last day. Yeah, but even before that, here's a little foretaste. We're going to resuscitate him. Okay, so let's not confuse a resuscitation and a resurrection, properly speaking, as it applies to Jesus, risen to a glorified state. Okay, the tomb's condition. What did he see? Something visible, a visible prompt, a visible cue that invites belief, right? Okay, so what might it be? Now we got to start digging. Now we got to go into the passage and look for clues. Be careful. I want to do the opposite of just start with some wild theory and force it into the text. That's what a lot of people do. You've seen it in science. I see it all the time in my world of biblical literature. People start with their pet theory and then they force it where it kind of fits, but it's not affirmed. All right? We need to do the opposite of that. That is called eisegesis. We want to do exegesis. We want to draw out of the narrative our interpretation. Don't begin with an interpretation and then fit it in where it might forcibly go, but that's the opposite of a demonstration. All right, so the exegetical data is primarily here. John 11 and 44 is going to talk about Lazarus' burial. In 19:39 and following, it's Jesus' burial. What I'm proposing that we do is that we hold together three moments. The burial of Lazarus, he's called out of the tomb. The burial of Jesus, that's number 2, and the discovery of the empty tomb in John 20. Often we read these texts in isolation and we don't see the linkage that is quite explicit when you notice the vocabulary of the original author. Okay, so I'm not sure. I hope this is clear. I'll try to make it more clear. In Mark chapter 15, we read about this burial of Jesus. Joseph bought a linen shroud, taking him down, wrapped him in the linen shroud, laid him in a tomb that had been cut out of the rock, and he rolled a stone against the entry of the tomb. Notice that that's a singular shroud. The Greek word there is sindon. Did you see the song this morning? Sindone, right? That's from the Italian, takes right from the Greek. La sindone is how we say the shroud in Italian, because it's how we say it in Greek. It's singular. That's what appears in Mark, and it is parallels in Matthew. That's the same word, did you know? That of this young man who is at Gethsemane, and he's following him. He says he's got nothing but a linen cloth about his body. Remember, they arrest Jesus, and to save his skin, he slips out of his sindon. Okay, well, that's helpful because it's at least as big to cover his nakedness. Without it, what's the result? He's naked. Okay, that's not a t-shirt, all right? In other words, that's a big cloth. That's helpful for understanding the dimensions, the size of the sindon. You know what the shroud looks like. All right. So the sindon is singular. That's what's in the burial in Luke 23. But notice what happens when we just turn the page. When we move from burial to resurrection, the vocab is going to change. What does that suggest? We'll look at 23 verse 53 in Luke. Then he took it down and wrapped it in a linen shroud, sindon, and laid him in a tomb cut in stone where no one had ever yet been laid. But then a few verses later, Mary Magdalene and the women are coming. Peter rose, ran to the tomb, stooping and looking in. That sounds familiar. He saw the linen cloths by themselves. This is almost a verbatim reproduction of John. Most people think that John, not most people, but some people argue that John has Luke as his source, and therefore the vocabulary matches to some extent. He saw the linen cloths. Wait a minute, that's the wrong word. He changed to othonia. It's a plural. And so tell me, is it not logical to infer that what he was wrapped in on Friday is still visible on Sunday, but now we get more specific and learn that in addition to the long sheet, there's at least something else. You can't have a plural unless you have at least two. And so now we ask, well, what else might there be? In addition to the long sheet, the sindon, what else could accommodate the plural in linen cloths, the othonia? This is where I think we need to go back to John 11. Because there we learned that when Lazarus, who had died, came out of the tomb, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth, Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Look at the word choice. The vocabulary here makes an absolute necessity to link the passages of the burial of Lazarus, 3 days in the tomb, called out of it at the end of 3 days. How is he buried? With a sudarium, with a face cloth, and he's bound. This is language that's going to recur later in regard to Jesus. And so, unbind him, let him go. Evidently, there's something to unbind. And we know with that with which he's bound because it's written right here. It's in front of our eyes. Keriais means linen strips. Friends, that accommodates the plural. That makes sense of the othonia. What does othonia refer to? Shroud plus strips. The strips that bind the hands and feet. This is my proposal. Okay? So, look at this. When Jesus is buried, we learn that Joseph and Nicodemus took the body of Jesus, verse 40, bound it in linen cloths with spices, as is the burial custom of the Jews. Do you see how everything there is so perfect and neat and tidy insofar as it gives us othonia, it's a plural. It gives us the fact that it's bound, exactly as we saw with Lazarus. And then, in case we were a little slow, he said, as is the burial custom. Do you remember? Right? It's like, where do I go to understand these burial customs? Some other book? No need. Right there in the very same book, we have another Jewish burial in the exact same circumstances, the exact same vocabulary. But are we reading Jesus' burial in light of that detail? I think many aren't. And oblivious to these linen strips, they're left in the dark. So, here's another element. The linen cloths are lying. In many translations, in John 20, verse 5, 6, and 7, we get the same participle, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Translators add words that aren't there. They say, these linen cloths are lying on the ground, as if the point is to say it's not lying on the stairwell, it's not lying on the table, it's on the ground. Pure invention. Out of thin air, the translators invented those words. Okay? Whereas lying there is something similar. Is the point to say it's there and not here? Again, it doesn't say that was simply an inference of the translator. The word simply means lying. I'm going to propose that what this means is lying flat. Like a balloon that's lost its air, the contents that once were inside once before no longer are. So the cloth can collapse. What do they collapse upon? This is a question we have to still take up. Another element, exegetical clue that we need to gather up and is often missed, because our translations don't help. In verse 5 and 6 and verse 8, we get he saw, as if it's the same vocab word. It's not. It's a different vocab word every single time in the original Greek. And that's important. It's programmatic, and it's seen elsewhere in the same gospel. I'm going to suggest that he's changing the verb of sight because there's a crescendo, like a light that is coming into the world, like a dawn that gets brighter and brighter. This passage is gradual and growing. Okay, so blepo means to see. Theoreo also means to see, but it's a different vocab word. And then at the end, horao. This is the climactic, and he saw and believed. You'll never guess where Mary's itinerary ends too. Here I've just traced Peter and John with these verbs in 5, 6, and 8. But Mary was in the darkness, wasn't she? How does she end? Isn't it verse, 18? I have seen the Lord. Which verb? Horao. By the way, chapter 9, do you remember the man born blind? The whole time, throughout the whole chapter, blepo, 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 see. In the end, I have seen the Lord. You'll never guess what verb. Horao. Okay, so John uses this as a literary device to talk about a faith that grows. It's incipient, it begins small, and yet it grows climactically. So here, my recap, I've got 5 minutes. Whew, come Holy Spirit. Okay, so what do we see? We saw the importance of the use of the plural, often missed. A lot of people just assume it means shroud. It's more specific than that. I'm proposing that it means shroud plus linen cloths. Why? For what follows. 2, 1940, to my mind, in no representation, in no visual aid that I've seen in the wrappings of Jesus has this element been noted. Watch. They bound the body in the linen cloths with the spices. 100 pounds of aloe and myrrh, according to the custom. The custom, we know what that is because of 3, linkage to 1144. That was where we read about Lazarus, who had the sudarium, who had the linen strips, and he's bound. This is so important if you know the biblical motif of binding and loosing. It's what you do to a prisoner and what you do when the prisoner is set free. As we'll see, Jesus is bound in death, okay, and yet released, loosed in resurrection. Okay, he's not held down. 4, the repetition of the participle kemena, lying, is important. It's the only descriptive word that we get of the Othonia. It comes 3 times, and that has to tell us something significant about what he saw. He didn't just see Othonia. He saw linen cloths lying. And I'm going to say that's a huge difference. The use of 3 distinctive sight verbs. This is the data. This is observable to all. What we need to do is gather it up together and create a narrative, abductive reasoning, right? And so here's what I'm going to propose. There's in a word, my kind of conclusion that I'm arguing for in this article. Taken together, these details suggest that the linens lay flat because they lay empty, collapsing when the corpse exited. Though the spices, the aloe and myrrh, presumably still bound inside, or did they rise from the dead too? If not, they're still inside. So seeing this, the beloved disciple believed that Jesus was risen. This is where that's kind of the conclusion I'm moving towards in my article. 2 minutes to highlight the data from the shroud. This is where I got a couple? Okay. All right. I'll take a breath. All right. Now we're shifting. Putting down the Bible, picking up the shroud. What do we observe? Again, back to being Sherlock. Just give me the data. Don't start with what's contested. Start with what's uncontested. Start with what is readily observable. 1, there are undistorted frontal and dorsal images. That is to say, we don't see evidences of a kind of Mickey Mouse effect, as I like to call it, right? Think of the ears, which are on parallel planes, right? If you drape a cloth around a body and it's pasted to every square inch of the face, and then spread that cloth flat, what happens to the ears? Well, they were on parallel planes. Now they're on the same plane, and we get on the sides something distorted, right? There's just an article that came out. Did you see it yesterday in the Daily Mail that says it's impossible that the Turin shroud covered the body of Jesus, given the fact that there's not a distortion or curvature. recycled old news that's been debunked long ago and yet making front pages all over again. Okay, so rehearsing just the observations, undistorted frontal and dorsal images. But 2, the lateral portions of the body are not seen. The plane that the ears sit on, we don't know about. I've got the X and Y axes. I've got the length and the width of the body from the front and from the back. What I don't have is the side, right? What I don't have is the top of the head, right? That Z dimension, if you like. Okay, so that is unseen. That's just observable data. 3, a gap between the frontal and dorsal images. Isn't that strange? Like if the cloth wrapped around him touched his face and the back of his head, if it was even pasted to the very top of the head, wouldn't you expect that one image that just bleeds into the other, right? That's not what we see. There's a separation of a few centimeters that separates the frontal image from the dorsal image. Why? Why? We're just gathering up the clues. 4, a gap in the frontal body image at the level of the shins, suggesting to some a crease in the cloth, right? Something perhaps that indicates that linen strip. Again, that's the interpretation, but the fact is that there's this gap, or at least that's been observed by some. Number 5, a depression in the beard, according to some American scientists, suggesting a strip to keep the mouth closed. I think some here, even at this conference, proposed that there might be a chin strap at the level of a beard. All right, what do we conclude from some of this? These observations align. This is as subtle and a word choice as I can think of. It's as non-daring as I can get. I'm just saying this comports, this is compatible with John's affirmation of a body with spices wrapped in linen cloths, 1940. See how I'm saying what's observable on the shroud is compatible with what we read in John 1940. In sum, John's Gospel and the Turin Shroud are harmonizable. Exactly what Joseph Ratzinger said in his 2011 discourse. So, all that to give you a picture. That was 1,000 words and more. A picture says much more. I wish I had a better one. This is all I got. Look, I've got popcorn from some packaging that I pulled out of my... All right. But here's what I was thinking of. In my hometown anyway, I remember we get 5-pound sacks of coffee. Just if you could try to visualize and imagine what 75 pounds is, that's something approximate. Imagine 15 of those. That gets you to 75 pounds, which corresponds to 100 Roman pounds of aloe. That's a lot of myrrh. Now, as you know, Stirp, though they looked for such evidence of that, they found no such thing. Even if there were maybe trace elements, nothing at the order of 100 pounds, not even close. Okay, so we don't have that. Many have assumed, although it never says, that those women and Nicodemus and Joseph anointed the body on Friday. It says no such thing. Instead, it says they took the body, bound it with the aloes and myrrhs. What if it's still in boxes or bags or baskets or clay vessels? I have no idea, right? I'm agnostic as to the particulars, but I'm suggesting that around the boundary of the body, and I don't pretend I know all the exact details of it, but this is what accommodates all the data. Why don't we see the sides? Why is the cloth flat and not distorted? Not because it's hovering in the air or vertical, as some assert, betraying the principle of Occam's razor, appealing to speculation when there's something ready at hand that comports with the data. Instead, it's wound around the body, and it's sitting on the aloes and myrrhs that are around the periphery. This is my proposal. I cling to it lightly. I hope that in the Q&A after this, I can get some pushback and maybe tweak and perfect this proposal here. But the reason I love this is because it suggests to me that exactly what Jesus had to say. Believe me, or believe because of the works that I do. And I think we have reasons to believe. Like John, we can see, and we can see and believe. I'm going to segue and stop right there. I'm going to give the stage to someone far superior to myself. Friends, this is just to the head. Infinitely more important is what we do with this information. And I hope we receive it in a heart full of love, a heart full of faith. I don't know of any better way to do that than to allow the mind to rest, and now, with a contemplative gaze, enter into the heart of Mary Magdalene, who awaits the coming of her Lord. This passage terminates neither in faith or reason, but in a loving encounter with Jesus. That's exactly the message of this beautiful meditation through movement by Michaela Barta. Michaela, can we give her a hand?
Clarify, my audience was asking what they loved this, but they want to know what they were watching.
What they were watching. Yes. Well, gosh, Michaela should answer the question. She escaped, so gosh, I don't know if that. But if you want to come on, Michaela, feel free. I'll give it a whirl. But do you know that song is called "Life and Death," and it's we've often talked about the Song of Songs together, the poetry of the love song between God and His covenant people. Mary Magdalene is often an allegory for that larger picture, right? She's read in that light. Remember, woman, why are you weeping? We read in John. Who is the woman if not Eve, right? Who is exiled from the garden? And here too, at the end of the story, we're back in a garden. And it starts in darkness. It starts in shadow and sadness. And yet it moves from death to life, right? From sorrow into joy. And I think the music and the movement is very suggestive of Mary Magdalene's ark, who experiences a kind of passage out of darkness and into light, a new creation. But it's very much this nuptial imagery, I think, of how God comes to marry His people, how God comes to enter into a love relationship. I'm doing too much interpretation. I love that the words are absent, to be honest. I think it's good that the viewers ask those questions, because that's exactly where contemplation begins, right? In our curiosity. Michaela, you want to say something more? No. Do you know she's never even done that in this space, and we have like a metal podium in the middle, and so I thought seriously. Oh, goodness.
Our audience said that was a great explanation.
Oh, that's great. Well, you know what? I think we need more of that, and it's the reason I wanted to present it here. I could have just given a heady discourse, and I think the mood in this room would be drastically different, right? But I hope that in our lives and in our work, even as intellectuals, we can do our study on our knees, as it were. Can I open up for more questions? Yes, you're in my line of sight.
Father Andrew, thank you. Is there any, regarding strips of linen, let's go back to that for a second. On the actual shroud image, I see no evidence, and I've heard no evidence, of binding strips being on his physical body, the hands, we just don't, from all the evidence and data I've seen, we don't see that in any of the imagery. Is that a fair?
I think you're right if you mean we don't see directly.
Yeah.
Do we see indirectly? I'm going to say yes, but so for example, I mentioned the depression in the beard, that the chin strap, perhaps the chin strap, the gap at the legs. I'll introduce one more since you asked. Do you know how the fingers are elongated?
Yes.
I've often repeated myself that, some have said, oh, it's a dislocated shoulder that accommodates that. But actually, as it's been pointed out to me, it's the webbing at the fingers. So it's not just the distance of the tip of the finger in relation to the start of the shoulder, but from the starting point of where webbing begins, that there's an elongation of fingers. Okay, so even while we have anatomical precision on so many points, this is not anatomically perfect in one sense. It could be the best explanation that I've heard, maybe others have other explanations, that there's, imagine like a sine wave, right? If this cloth isn't perfectly taut, but if it's draped over, and then when stretched out, the effect might be elongation of those fingers. So that would be not a direct sight of the strips, but an indirect allusion to them.
To follow up, and I won't monopolize anymore.
Yeah.
Since we agree that we don't see direct evidence, that's speculative, is it possible that they would have used linen strips
On the outside?
behind him externally?
Absolutely. I tend towards that myself.
What I'm tending towards,
Yeah.
believing. Then, when you have those four hypotheses, and he believed, when I do my talks, I have a fifth hypothesis that I present.
Okay.
They had been used to opening shrouds, closing shrouds. They came in Sunday to reanoint.
Mm-hmm.
That was normal practice. What would they have, if the strips were external, they would have had to untie them. And
Right.
that would have been standard knowledge.
Exactly.
So if you're seeing that shroud in that description going into the tomb, and the linen cloths, but it is still bound.
Right.
Think of the significance of that.
Right.
That would tell them, A, they didn't run out with the whole body in Sindon.
Exactly.
Secondly, who in their right mind to steal just the body would open the shroud, untie the strips, open it, remove the body, flip it over and retie it empty?
Exactly.
To me, my hypothesis is the linen strips are the key to their understanding and they
Agreed.
believe.
Agreed. No, 100%. We're on the same page. I'll add. Yeah, and to fan the flames of that same argument, there's no displacement in the bloodstains. There's no smearing. There's no smudging. Not even a millimeter. So if it's pasting, and we know that he's separated, and at an early hour before rigor mortis is relaxing, that's before the 40th hour, and yet there's no separation. There's no signs of wrenching it off with a human cloth. It adds, I think,
We're
for
going to
the
stay with that hypothesis.
Yes, sir.
When I give a talk, I get a volunteer and I have a 15-foot linen cloth. And I suggest, I don't say it's the truth, but I use John Jackson's speculation that that long strip was either excised with scissors or ripped, and it pretty well fits from the ankles around the knees and up to about the shoulders. Do you have any opinion on that strip?
I think it's a viable option. I just, sometimes, at least the reproductions, the pictures that I've seen, still show too closely bound to the body. In other words, they leave out the aloes and myrrhs. I think I'm on board, but what I want to see is someone take seriously John 19:40. This is what I've not seen. I think everybody's assuming that it's smeared or used in a paste or a gel. It's, to my mind, that's is
Also,
what.
across the hall earlier today, there was the speculation that thread is ancient thread,
Right.
and was done about 73 AD. Have
Yeah,
you
Masada.
also learned that?
Yeah, I've seen those arguments, and I think they're compelling.
So they would have reattached it for whatever purposes.
It's possible. I think it's very, very much a plausible theory. I hold lightly to it until we have something more definitive, but yes, I think it's very plausible.
Others.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Hi, I'm going to go mundane,
Sure.
okay, on what the first thing was that they believed. Because a woman, there need to be two women to testify to something to be taken seriously, I think, in Jewish law. And they heard from Mary that the body was gone. So they take off because they got to see that for themselves. And when they first saw and believed, to me, from a woman's point of view, that says they believe Mary for that first step.
Yeah.
It doesn't disturb the rest
Understood.
of everything you say, but
Yeah.
you know.
It is a theory, and it's an ancient one. She's saying, what is the object of belief in verse 8 when he saw and believed? Maybe it's just the testimony of the woman. Okay, that just takes all the wind out of the momentous. Like, when you get to that climax, if that's all it is, that's not saying much. I grant you that it's a possibility in the text. What I think is missed in that, one is I don't think it's paying attention to the vocab of blepo and all the way crescending into horao. I think it's minimizing what's belief. If horao is, just that they said that the body wasn't there, we have nothing momentous to cling to there. But beyond that, I think the church, so we have a phrase in the Catholic tradition, I'm not sure if that's yours, but lex orandi, lex credendi, we say. So the law of belief the law of prayer is the law of belief. It seems to me that this has been received, this particular text, as a reference to resurrection. I could be wrong about that, but it seems to me that more often than not, this is how we're taking that text. And I think that's the better reading. And it's equally as plausible. So here's the thing. When you have multiple options, you can start, as a starting point, say, any one of them might be true. It might be agnostic. And then as you consider all the evidence, one might stand out more. I'm going to say that given the whole projection, that this is a lofty claim, and I'm going to go with Brown in 2008, that says, no, this is indeed a reference to resurrection. Can we follow up in the side? I think I don't want to monopolize the conversation.
That was not.
Oh, okay. I think it was a sign from God or something. Okay. Yes.
I wonder, I don't know how the seam was sewn on.
The seam?
The side strip.
The side strip, yeah.
So would Joseph buy a kit and includes a shroud and a linen strip, and if that's how you do it, and then you sew it on later?
I wouldn't dare speculate on that. I have no starting point. So again, I really want to begin with a ground that I know. I think it's a methodological principle here is hold for your last affirmations the speculation. Start with what we can see and what we can agree upon. I think it's very debatable whether it's Joseph of Arimathea or John or who does the sewing. So hold that at arm's length, right? And then, but because here's what's happening in the discourse, and some of you know this very well. A lot of scholars are clinging to their favorite little factoid and saying, we can dismiss all of Shroud's study because see what wild claim is being made? Don't give them the opportunity to do that is what I want to say. I want to start with minimal facts and make the strongest argument from there. That does give them a chance to escape out the back door.
But the strip is sewn on, it's not woven, is
That's
it?
right. Yeah.
We're going to have to cut it off there, guys. Let's give Father Andrew Dalton.